Mr. Robert, do you prefer to take an oath or make an affirmation?
An oath, thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
The evidence which I shall give in these proceedings shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God.
Sir, is your name Stuart Robert?
Yes, sir.
You're federal Liberal member for the Fadden electorate?
The federal member for Fadden, sir, representing the Liberal National Party.
Yeah, okay. You're appearing here in response to an attendance notice, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Can I show you this notice or a copy of it? Is it a copy of your notice to attend, Mr. Robert?
Yes.
Attend to that.
It's Exhibit 16.
Mr. Robert, you've held the seat of Fadden since 2007, correct?
Yes, sir.
So that you successfully contested 4 elections for that seat?
Yes, sir.
You know both of Kristyn Boulton and Felicity Stevenson?
I do.
How do you know them, sir?
They're being employed in my office under the Member of Parliament Act, the MOPS Act, for ostensibly 10 years each.
And both were candidates in the Gold Coast City Council elections held in March 2016?
Correct.
Up until the time they were required to leave, they had been working as in what capacity in your electorate office?
They were electorate officers. That's the designation under the MOPS Act. So their job is to assist our constituents.
In Ms Stevenson's case, she was unsuccessful in the council election.
Correct.
Did she, after the election was held, return to that employment in your office?
That's right. So I took advice from the Special Minister of State, whose job is, amongst other things, to give advice to MPs on these complex arrangements. And they gave very specific advice as to when Miss Boulton and Miss Stevenson had to leave the office around 1st of February, and when they could return if unsuccessful. They took the appropriate leave, all cleared through the Office of SMOS. And once Felicity lost the election, she came back under those arrangements.
Did they announce their candidacies together, or what was the sequence? Can you recall?
I can recall. Give or take, at the end of October, Margaret Grumman announced she wasn't running again. Kristyn announced early November, let's call it the 7th of November. She campaign launched on the 29th of November, because I was there. For Division 4. Division 5 was held by Tracy Gilmore. She announced through the media, give or take the 18th of January, that she wasn't contesting. It turned out, very sadly, that she had breast cancer. So on give or take the 18th of January, Stacey Chanel from the Australian Workers Union would then put her hand up immediately, and then Felicity would announce at the end of January sometime.
In Ms Boulton's case, did she have any discussion with you, seeking your advice about whether you should or whether she should or shouldn't nominate?
Yes, she did.
Okay. Prior to her nomination?
Yes, prior.
What kind of advice did you give her, do you recall?
I told her not to get the wobbles. She'd run in 2008. She'd run again in 2012 and got the wobbles and pulled out. And I said, KB, if you're going to do this, this is probably your last shot in the locker. Don't get the wobbles. Be intentional.
And in Ms Stevenson's case, did she seek your counsel as to whether she should nominate also?
She let me know she was thinking about it. It's a good opportunity. She lives that way. Would I support her? I said, of course. She's a much more seasoned political operator.
Did you facilitate donations to those candidates, both of them, for campaign purposes?
I sought permission for the Liberal National Party to provide dollars into them, yes.
How much was provided in total in each case?
$30,000 in each case.
Right. Did you choose that amount?
I think it might have been a discussion. We certainly had a discussion at the end of January once Stacey Chanel had come out, so that the Australian Workers Union was now going to be running in my area, and of course Eddie Saroff, who'd run for the Labor Party previously. So it was no longer a KB and Fell in an election per se. There were some pretty seasoned people now involved. So the idea of Labor getting a foothold in my part of the Northern Gold Coast wasn't particularly appealing to me. So we had a discussion about if I could seek assistance for funding for them. I probably nominated an amount of about $25,000, which is probably a fair starting point for them to fight.
Well, you just mentioned in your evidence the words "we had a discussion."
Yes.
I'd like to try to identify the occasion, if we could, and who was present.
It was in my office. It was the end of January. It would have been the week of Australia Day. I was overseas until the middle of January. Came back. The political year kicks off on Australia Day, just the general day it does. So at the end of that week, once Felicity said, yes, I'm going to run, which was probably the Wednesday, Thursday of that week, it was then that I grabbed both girls in my office and said, well, if you're both going to run and you're running against some pretty seasoned Labor outfits or people aligned that way without prejudice against them, you might need some assistance, and I'm going to seek advice on whether the Fadden Forum can do that.
Both women were there, you say?
Yes.
Were they both still in your employ? I know not directly, but employed in your office at that time?
Yes, they wouldn't go on leave, I think, until Monday the 1st of Feb, whatever the date the Special Minister of State gave us.
Would not be correct then to say that Ms Boulton, for instance, had left her employment by around mid-January?
No, I'll go back and check because there's leave applications have to be submitted under the MOPS Act, so we'll be able to tell you exactly when that occurred. But to the best of my recollection, I thought it was the 1st of February.
At any rate...
Unless she'd taken annual leave beforehand, but we can ascertain that for you.
Did Ms Stevenson leave the employment in your electoral office subsequent to Ms Boulton, or did they quit at the same time?
I recall they both went on leave the same time.
And when did they go on leave in relation to this meeting you are speaking about in your electorate office?
After.
Sometime after?
Yes.
Who initiated the meeting?
I did.
Why?
Because I wanted to let them know that I'd be seeking permission to get some dollars and cents from them.
Did you tell them why you were concerned to do that?
Yeah, absolutely, because they're fighting the AWU and Eddie Saraf and they're seasoned political operatives.
And when did you learn that those candidates would be opposing the women from your office?
Eddie announced Christmas Eve, but I wasn't paying much attention. I went on leave to Japan on the 1st of January. But I probably knew Eddie was running before I left in January. I didn't know Tracy Gilmore for Division 5 wasn't going to run until I got back from Japan on the 15th of January.
Who did you think she was supported by?
No, Tracy Gilmore's a lovely lady. She was a sitting councillor, so she had held the seat, if you may. And then she announced mid-January that she was not contesting it for health reasons, and then Stacey Chanel from the AWU put her hand up.
You mentioned Stacey Chanel from the AWU.
She's a local AWU organiser, that's right.
I see. Did you consider that she might also be being financially supported? Was that part of the consideration? Your part?
I assumed that if a local AWU organiser was running, Penny Tolan was now running for the Labor Party, that the union movement would be in there.
Well, given that this was a local election that we're concerned with, none of those candidates were party endorsed, correct?
That's correct, yes.
What then is the interest in having the Liberal Party support two candidates being your employees?
Because if Eddie and Stacey had won, you'd now have Labor-aligned Eddie in my electorate as a councillor. I'd have the local AWU organiser now as a councillor. And the reality is the Labor Party uses these footholds to then contest other state and federal seats, which would make my job a lot harder.
What was the primary concern? Was it to make your job harder if those two people got elected?
Yes.
That was your principal motivation?
Yes.
What would you expect a decent campaign for a councillor to cost?
Somewhere between 25 and 50, give or take. Depends how much dollars and cents you want to spend on direct mail and advertising.
I may have asked you, but did you choose the figure of 30,000 that was eventually paid?
I chose the figure of 25.
Right.
The last 5 came in ostensibly from pleas from KB sometime at the end of the campaign.
Then going back to this meeting you had, I think at the end of January 29/30 thereabouts.
29, or 28, 29, yes.
Right. What did you say about the source of the money that you proposed to facilitate their receiving?
I said I'd seek permission for it to come from the Fadden Forum.
Did either of them make a response to that?
No, the Fadden Forum been running for a long time. I guess to short-circuit the discussion, if I may, sir, the Fadden Forum isn't an organisation, doesn't have an ABM. It's not a business. It's simply a name. It's actually the Fadden Forum is the Liberal National Party. All funds are banked in the Liberal National Party. I have no control over them whatsoever. I can't spend a cent. I have to seek permission from the state director from the party to spend a cent.
Well, you say that you mentioned that you would seek permission to spend this Fadden Forum
for the
money.
Fadden Forum to provide some money to them. That's correct.
They didn't indicate to you, they didn't know what the Fadden Forum's business was? There's no lack of understanding is what I'm getting at?
No, it'd be hard to be in my office for such a long time and not understand how we raise money for the Liberal National Party.
Were both these candidates, however, involved in community work, that is to say electorate work rather than fundraising?
Yes, they're all involved in electorate work, that's correct.
Is that a fair dichotomy, that they're not involved in the fundraising activities for you or the Liberal Party?
That is correct.
Right. But they had worked in your office, as you told us, for about 9 years or so.
There's only 4 staff.
Right. What circumstances occurring in the course of their employment, you being a big part of that environment, would cause them to understand what you were talking about when you mentioned funding from Fadden Forum? Why would they know what you were talking about?
Part of being a Member of Parliament is raising money for re-election. We may not like it nor appreciate it. No one really likes doing it, but it's part of the job. So the idea of fundraising is raised from time to time. There's no question about that. And there's always discussions, especially around campaigns, where you run campaign budgets and have to raise substantial amounts of money. And we like to help our colleagues in terms of funding their campaigns as well. So it's a discussion that gets a lot of airtime in my office.
Would that include, though, electorate officers who are not themselves involved in fundraising?
It would, because generally the office breaks bread together once a day, or at least has morning tea, and it's not a very large office.
The name would have cropped up in the course of even casual discussions over the years?
Hard to get by a week without the name being aired.
Right. And the nature of its existence was to raise funds for Liberal Party purposes?
For the Liberal National Party, that's correct.
So that we can be clear about that, is the money raised for your re-election or for Liberal National Party purposes generally?
For both. And that's made well clear to those that seek to donate, that it's not only for my re-election, but also for the re-election of those in the wider Liberal National Party fold.
It raises quite a bit of money.
Yes, it does.
Didn't it? Yeah. Well, it still exists?
Yes, sir, it does.
Still raises money?
Yes, sir, it does.
It raises more than you would need, am I right, for your own re-election campaign?
That would be correct.
Substantially more?
Yes.
And the rest is applied... Well, do you draw from funds raised by Fadden Forum for your re-election campaigns?
I do.
Does that need the permission of someone in the LNP hierarchy?
Yes, I can't spend a cent without the LNP approving it.
But you would get that approval readily, would you not?
No. No, I'll spend at times money in the general course of campaigning from week to week, and I'd seek reimbursement, and at times the Treasurer will say, no, he doesn't believe that's appropriate, and I can wear it personally.
Right. Is the funding for your re-election not done on like a fixed sum basis? Is it like on a reimbursement basis?
Probably the best way to look at it is, without being flippant, you don't fatten the pig on market day. So campaigning is something you do all during the years. You may run events or activities as part of the re-election process. Of course, a bulk of the fund is spent in the last 33 days, but fundraising and expenditure of funds occurs throughout the course of a 3-year period.